Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this wonderful morning. It's Monday morning, January 18th, 2021, as we start our annual MLK celebration. I thank everyone for waking up this morning and joining us early. Normally, this is a breakfast, but, given this current circumstances, we still, as humans, find a way to come together anyways. So thank goodness for this platform. Today we celebrate a man who fought for equal justice under the law. Not only him, but the others that ascribed to civil rights and equality here in the US. And so, as someone mentioned earlier to me this morning, we as a community continue to hold that torch and to celebrate not only him, but the others that fought for civil rights, and to remind us the reason behind why we do this, and why we need to continue the work. This morning, we are partnering with Barnstable No Place for Hate to bring this program to you. My name is Vedna Haywood. I am the chair of Plymouth No Place for Hate, and Jean Morrison, who is joining me today, is part of the Barnstable No Place for Hate. Jean?
Good morning. I'm Jean Morrison. I'm part of Barnstable No Place for Hate, and I thank Vedna and the group of Plymouth No Place for Hate for asking us to join them. Barnstable No Place for Hate was formed in the fall of 2019 after Barnstable police had to answer a call for the defacing of a Christian camp in Centerville. So we're made up of a group of community volunteers, and we have a steering committee with members from the town council, the NAACP, various different faith groups, the Wampanoag tribe, and other community members. And our approach is we come together to address issues of hate through love. Thank you. Enjoy the program this morning.
Thank you very much, Jean. So this morning we have a culmination of this program. We have song, we have spoken word, we have wonderful panelists that are joining us, and we also have some partnerships. I just want to recognize the partnerships that help bring this together. Not only Barnstable No Place for Hate, but we also have Bethel AME Church. We have Reverend Simmons that also assisted in bringing this program, as well as Pilgrim Museum, the alumni from the Northern Lights, Plymouth North and South High School, and also Indivisible Plymouth that assisted in bringing this program together. And without further ado, we will start the program with a song from the Northern Lights alumni, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing has been watered. We have come, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Thank you. Yes, it was wonderful. Yeah, let's just give a hand clap. That wonderful, wonderful rendition of "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which is the anthem, the civil rights anthem. So we will go next to spoken word. This is a young man named Romi, who is from the Cape, and this is just him just stating kind of, you know, his voice or his sentiment and how, you know, he feels. So this is just a spoken word from him, and we'll go forward with that.
Criticism and division, it goes deeper down. Now they judge us depending on our religion. It's like we're animals and we must be kept under supervision. Look around you, it's everywhere. Just turn on the television. African American isn't something you can own in your possession. We're confused, scared, and filled with so much aggression. Pulled over. Please, officer, don't shoot. It's a comb that I put in my hair, not a gun that you claim to see me pulling from beneath my chair. How do we all allow this hate to go around in the air? I'm black, you're white. That doesn't make us separate pairs. What about our feelings? It's like you all don't care. George Floyd cried, please. Please, officer, don't hurt me. Please, I can't breathe. You answer me with stop resisting. Clearly there's an issue. Please, at least let me tell my mom that I'll miss you. It seems that a black man cannot walk or drive at a certain time, or he'll be targeted and accused of bringing a 9, or even a weapon of any kind. A black man in America try to get by, try to strive, living life, trying to survive. But the title that's given is a criminal in disguise. Hands up, don't shoot. Put the guns down to save our youth. Unemployment. They'd rather if on our foreheads it says deployment. Front lines, so they can take our lives. They say we're a part of society. Lies. Locked up behind bars for the rest of our life. You can see the enjoyment within their eyes. Who am I? A black man in America. I guess that means I'm not supposed to live a great life. Why? Because I'm not white. The land of the great isn't so great because it's not a fairy tale for us. Corona's the only break. At least they'll stay away from us. And even then, they're putting 7 shots within our backs. Please, officer, get off our necks. Leave the door to success open so we can climb up the steps. Thank you. I wish you the best.
Okay, so this is Romi. Romi was part of the youth. He is a sophomore, as you see, at Cape Cod Community College. And Barnstable No Place for Hate performed a listening group for youth. And so Romi actually, along with many other youth, actually either gave their thoughts or did spoken word. So that's from this particular program. we will go next to Yaxsarie Velázquez, who will talk about MLK, give an excerpt from one of his writings.
So I picked a sermon by MLK, and it's called God is Able. So it starts off, let us notice that God is able to subdue all the powers of evil. In affirming that God is able to conquer evil, we admit the reality of evil. Christianity has never dismissed evil as illusionary or an error of the moral mind. It reckons with evil as a force that has objective reality. But Christianity contends that evil contains the seeds of its own destruction. History is a story of evil forces that advance with seemingly irresistible power, only to be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice. There is a law in the moral world, a silent, invisible imperative akin to the laws of the physical world, which reminds us that life will work only in a certain way. The Hitlers and the Mussolinis have their day, and for a certain period they may wield great power, but soon they are cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. In his graphic account of the Battle of Waterloo in Les Miserables, Victor Hugo wrote, "Was it possible that Napoleon should win this battle? We answer, no. Why? Because the Wellington? Because of the valor of his opponents? No, because of God. Napoleon had been impeached before the infinite, and his fall was decreed. He vexed God. Waterloo was not a battle. It was a change of the front of the universe. In a real sense, Waterloo symbolizes the doom of every Napoleon and is an eternal reminder to a generation drunk with military power that in a long run of history, might does not make right, and the power of the sword cannot conquer the power of the spirit." So this sermon was in 1956, and it's so crazy to me how relevant it is still today. And it just reminded me that in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the feelings of helplessness in our country, in a country where we're supposed to feel like our home, it is our home. This excerpt just kind of reminded me that there is hope and that there is a God that's greater than any leader in our country, a God that is greater than any leader in the world, a God that created the universe, created us, and will fight in our behalf. No matter how dark it may seem, God will always be there working in the background. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yaxsarie, for those words. And just a reminder that today the theme for this program is Bridging the Gap, Moving History Towards a Better Future. And so even in these beginning portions of this program, we have featured the youth, because without them, we do not stop this. So this is how we're beginning to bridge our gap, to bridge our experiences that we've had, and move it towards a better future, not only for our kids, but for their children as well. So we will now start. We have a video montage that was provided to us by Pilgrim Hall Museum through Donna Curtin. And so we'll start with this beautiful montage that her and a curator put together.
Correct.
Because to send people with no money, nobody to receive them, just to come, get off a bus, stand on the street, it was one of the most inhuman things that I have ever seen. I think the one shining light in this whole episode was the fact that the people who came forward to help were people from different racial backgrounds.
Thank you. Just a little bit of difficulty there, but this was a this was a video montage that actually went through the history of Plymouth, incorporated some of the Cape as well. During the 1960s, the Cape actually received people from reverse freedom rides. So some of the states, particularly Arkansas, sent Black families up to the Cape area and stated that they would have jobs and housing waiting for them. It was a way that they could stick it, in a sense, to the Kennedys, and just because of their imposing of like civil rights legislation. And so in part of that filming, you saw that the round table where the woman was speaking, she was speaking about how the cruelty of it, the fact that it was stated that, you know, President Kennedy would be there to greet them, that there would be housing, that there would be jobs, and there was none of that. And so, but in the spirit of humanity, as you know, even in the midst of everything that is even happening today, the one silver lining is our spirit of humanity that exists here in the United States. And so in that spirit of humanity, people pulled together within the Cape, and they provided housing for these families, they provided clothes, and so on and so forth. And so some of the families eventually moved on, whether they moved on to Boston or moved back out of the state, but some of them still actually do exist. So that's part of our like local history in terms of parts of the civil rights movement. The next, we will have Reverend Dr. Barbara Simmons from the Bethel AME Church, and she will speak to the historical perspective on this event. The AME Church is a church, for those who don't know, it's a church that exists somewhat in the center of our town. It is 154 years old, and started, as the montage just mentioned, after Black families had settled here in Plymouth. So without further ado, I will have Reverend Dr. Barbara Simmons speak.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Martin Luther King Day. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. A few months ago, I, along with two other former pastors of Bethel, Plymouth, had an interview with Rich Halbert of the Old Colony newspaper, as Bethel, Plymouth celebrated 155 years of Christian ministry in the town of Plymouth. And I said to Rich that it was important to capture the specialness of love that exists at Bethel, Plymouth. This spirit of love existed even before I became pastor. Sitting down with the two other former pastors helped me to validate this love that meets one at the door of 6 Seaver Street. Bethel, Plymouth is a special place where I have had the awesome blessing of pastoring for the last 15 and a half years. It's family. Can you imagine how many persons of color lived and worked in the town of Plymouth 155 years ago? As I have traveled around the town, I have received various testimonies about the good people of Bethel, Plymouth in the past and even in the future, in the present. The memorable people of Bethel, Plymouth. So many of us attend Bethel, Plymouth are most impressed that a small number of men and women were able to purchase property in Plymouth. Our history records that there were a number of white citizens of Plymouth who supported the efforts of the founders of Bethel, Plymouth. Fast forward 2021, it's going to take love, commitment, and getting to know one another that's going to move us from this divisive place where we find ourselves. And we're not comfortable with it, we don't like it. We are indeed in trouble, but I do believe we can move from this place. Each one of us must do our part. And even if we don't benefit from our efforts personally at this present time, those who come after us will just as present members of Bethel, Plymouth are beneficiaries of that beautiful piece of property at 6 Seaver Street. And I share this often, that legacy is important. So I would say this morning to everyone gathered today and those who will come and have service with us at 11, let's commit to move with the change that is before us, because I believe this time, and I know this time, we will not stand to go back any longer. No matter how many insults come our way, we will not go back. The time is now. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Reverend Simmons. Thank you for that piece. We will go ahead now and actually start with our panelists. Joining me today in terms of moderating is Brooke Holmes, who is a student at Plymouth North High School. We have 3 panelists today. Our panelists are Maryana Crawley. We also have James Hardeman and Delores Daluz. We will start with Delores. If you could start, Brooke.
Delores Daluz moved to Cape Cod in 1957 with her husband Joe and 3 children. In 1960, the mother of 6 became involved in the local chapter of the NAACP with her husband, who became the chapter president in 1970 and served for 20 years at her side. Mr. Daluz was appointed to the position of Barnstable Building Commissioner in 1973, where he also served for 20 years. Together, they served the Black community of the town of Barnstable for decades. They assisted Judy Barnett from the Barnstable Fair Housing Committee, still in existence today. Delores chairs the Joe Daluz Unsung Heroes Scholarship Committee and hosts the annual awards luncheon of the same name to honor outstanding citizens and their commitment to civil rights and serving the Black community and college career bound through high school seniors. Delores has served on the Board of Trustees for the Hyannis Public Library and the Salvation Army and the Cape Cod Council of Churches. She has also served on the steering committee for the Baby Center, which provides critical basic items to low-income families living on the Cape for infants and up to the age of 4. She is a founding member of the Zion Heritage Museum in Hyannis, founded in 2007 to celebrate the art, cultural, and history of people of color on Cape Cod. She has served as as the secretary to the Zion Museum and the Cape Cod chapter of the NAACP. In 2010, Delores and her husband Joe were honored by the town of Barnstable for their service to the community as they served as grand marshals of the annual Town of Barnstable 4th of July parade in 2015. In 2017, Delores was honored with the Mercy Otis Warren Cape Cod Women of the Year Award. Beyond her commitment to her family and community service, Delores is a published author, poet, and local actress and songwriter. She enjoys working in her expansive garden, cooking for family and friends, live jazz theater, and Cape Cod Symphony. Delores is a spirit filled with love, life, and treasured friends, laughter, and God.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brooke.
Secondly, we have Maryana Crawley. She is a student from
Oops.
Oh, Brooke, you're muted somehow. Brooke, I'll take over. You're muted. We can't hear you. Okay, great. Okay. So I don't know if you want to. So we have Maryana Crawley. She's a sophomore at Barnstable High School, who likes to spread awareness regarding social justice. She identifies as queer, Black, and Brazilian, and Portuguese. And lastly, we have Jim Hardeman. Jim is an experienced senior clinician who has a history of working in individual family services industry, skilled in nonprofit organizations, coaching, crisis intervention, team building, group therapy, and has a very strong healthcare services professional who graduated from Harvard University Kennedy School of Government. Jim is a civil rights activist who walked with Martin Luther King, actually training in Biloxi, Mississippi on how to march. Jim has also done policy work for 2 of our governors here in Massachusetts. And he has also worked with the Clinton administration on policies regarding women and violence. So please welcome all of our 3 panelists.
You unmuted? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And And we will start with questions. Let me see if I can have James. I do not see him up here. And Maryana, I can come out. And Maryana as well. James, could you please tell us about your experiences as a civil rights activist in the 60s? And actually, if you could actually introduce yourself. We've introduced you, but just go ahead and introduce yourself. And I ask that each panelist do before we go into questions.
Happy to. Unfortunately, I'm holding my iPhone since I'm not able to use my computer. But I've resided in Plymouth for about 35 years. But my activism started in 1967. My first civil rights march took place in Biloxi, Mississippi. And if any of you have seen the movie, sort of in, I guess, the Heat of the Night, or Denzel Washington involved in one of his first movies dealing with issues of civil rights. As I've kind of shared with many of Dr. King's followers, Mississippi was the armpit of the civil rights movement versus Atlanta, Georgia, or other places. So I've continued sort of my commitment relative to that. As far as background, and I want to be short on this because we have, my other 2 partners on the panel. I look back in 1967, I'm from Athens, Georgia. And at that time we had the KKK. And these individuals would cover their faces, but harass and bully and threaten the Black community. I'm amazed that 61 years later, we have white supremacists, no different than the KKK, but they're proud and happy to show their faces. And they're validated by our president, where before, like the KKK, their identities were covered. Unfortunately, today, their identities are on the front page of the Boston Globe, the New York Times, and all of that. And they're proud of what they do. So sort of in closing, responding to that particular question, I feel that, what have we learned from US history? Very little. Very little wisdom, very little insight, because we continue to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Maryana?
Hi, I am Maryana Crawley. I am a student at Barnstable High School. I've heard many stories from multiple relatives of mine where they have witnessed or undergone racism. And at this point, it's heartbreaking to hear. My grandfather and my grandmother had a biracial marriage, and that during their time was not welcomed, and they would get harassed and sometimes even physically harassed. It was definitely a hard time, and it still is a hard time because now we have systematic racism, but we're aware of it at an extreme length. And I just hope that this cycle of discrimination and hatred will soon come to an end.
I agree. Thank you, Maryana. Delores.
Hi, good morning. I'm Delores Daluz, and my experience started when we moved to the Cape here from Delaware, and looking for a place to live. And we really couldn't find a place to live. We ended up staying with Joe's father for a short period with 3 kids in 1 bedroom. And it was, so we soon hooked up with Judy Barnett, and we formed the Fair Housing Committee. There were other people in the town also looking for places. Otis Air Force Base was full bloom, and some of the airmen had left, the organization. And I thought I'd put that on mute. I thought I'd put it on mute. I'm sorry. This is my first time, honestly. I'm sorry.
Good morning, Mother.
Maria.
So you're getting ready for school.
Well, life goes on. What can you say? This is home. I am home, So that's what happens in my house. The phone rings, the kids call. Anyway, when we formed the committee and we sent out white people to find out, when we saw an ad in the paper for a house, we sent white people out, and sure enough, it was available. And of course, when a Black person showed up, it was no longer available. So that went on for quite a while. And so that was my first introduction. And also with Juliet Bernstein, when I first moved here, she was the president of the League of Women's Voters, and I was with her for a while. And then we hooked up with the NAACP, which was formed in Falmouth, by the way, not in Hyannis, but it had a branch in Hyannis as well. So we joined the Hyannis branch, and I forget who was president at the time. But anyway, I was president to Eugenia Forts when she was I was secretary to Eugenia when she was president. And Eugenia is known as our Rosa Parks of
Cape Cod. She worked and in fact, she has a beach here in Hyannis Port, right down from the Kennedys, named after her, because a lot of the Black women and men worked in the Kennedy compound as maids and cooks and chauffeurs. So she, instead of coming home after one of her jobs, she decided to go sit at the beach right there in Hyannis Port. Well, don't you know, someone called and the police came and removed her. Well, I'll tell you, she never let the town forget it. At every town meeting, she would somehow find a way to put that in and stick it to them every time. So before she passed away, I forget what year it was, they named the beach after Eugenia Forts. She did not give up. And to this day, the beach is still there, and it was a big celebration for the town. So we don't have to hear about the beach anymore. It's there for everybody to go see.
Thank you.
So that was one story. I also wanted to say the people that you saw in the video, I worked with. I'm getting myself all worked up here. Margaret Mosley, Eugenia Forts, Reverend Kenneth Warren. We were all in the mix together, getting the people from Arkansas straight away here. So it was a big time. A lot of people in the community came forth. We formed cars to take them because they were out at Otis Air Base. Nobody had cars, so we had a car pool for people to meet their doctor's appointments, to go look for jobs. It was a big time here in the town, and it was a lot of people left. A lot of the people that came on the bus left Hyannis in the area because there was no jobs here. They went to Boston and had relatives in other parts of the country. But one family did stay on, and they're still here today. It's now great grandchildren here that are here, the Bell family. So,
Thank you so
you're
much,
welcome.
Dolores. Thank you. Wonderful. So we will start with questions. I don't know. I'll start with a question first, and Brooke and I will go back and forth in terms of questioning. So I will start with Jim. Could you please tell me about your experiences as a civil rights activist in the 60s, and how did the protests and/or initiatives work then? And would you consider them effective?
I guess in sort of my response to sort of your second question, I can relate to Black Lives Matter, but what I share with the young people is that Black Lives mattered during the time of Dr. King and myself marching. We didn't use the acronym, BLM, but I look back on my time in Georgia. We had signs at the water fountain, whites only, colored only. When we went to a movie, all the Blacks had to be in a balcony and all the whites had to be on the first floor. At the end of the cinema, the whites would be out first and then the Blacks would follow because we could not be seen as a group together.
Wow.
When I walked down the sidewalk and a white was coming toward me, I could not look in the face of that white person eye to eye, because that would be considered a challenge, a threat. I would have to step off the sidewalk and walk in the street until they passed by. Those were my days. I grew up, my family were sharecroppers. So our career was picking cotton. Coming up north, it was like, I'll use the acronym day and night. I left the night and came to the day, but the racism still exists, but it was camouflaged. People would say welcome and give you a hug and all of that. But my realization that the racism, the prejudice never went away. It was concealed. And when there was times where an opportunity to sort of prove that you are my friend, I find myself standing alone. So when I share with young people about Black Lives Matter and I see them march, there's sort of a chuckle or a smile because I see them marching with cell phones. And when you look at Dr. King marching and my marching, we didn't have cell phones. Everything, we went through a training. And part of our training is you march, and many times you put your hands in your pocket and you march. And your head wasn't swiveling back and forth because the more you look at the crowd, the more the crowd closed in on you. When you march, you have to look at the back of the head of the person in front of you. If somebody was spitting on you or punching you, you picked up the person in front of you, whoever fell, and you kept on going. You don't challenge. So when I see young people marching now, yes.
I just wanted to, if you could speak to the
I just feel that.
Could you speak to the relevance of having your hand in your pockets when you're marching, the reasoning behind that?
Yes. Yes. Because if the crowd saw your fists, your hands balling up, because that's anger. The crowd would close in and start punching you and beating you. So for Dr. King is, if your anger was getting the best of you, you put your hands in your pockets. So again, when I see young people marching, they have no history behind them. They're dealing with 2020, 2021. And relative to learning history, I wish that the young people for Black Lives Matter went back in time and looked at how this in the 60s, how we marched and learned from that. And I think that would make the movement even stronger. You got to bring history forward. Don't be in denial about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, so if we could even piggyback on that. Go ahead, Brooke.
Is a change in cultural or societal attitude as important as policy and legislative changes that may result? Please explain.
And that's up to anyone. I don't know.
Oh, I thought we were taking turns. I don't want to keep on jumping in.
Okay. So let's speak to Delores on that. Do you think?
Will you repeat the question, please?
Is a change in cultural or societal attitude as important as policy and legislative changes that may result?
Well, I guess they kind of work together. A change in attitude. Yeah. I don't think you can do one without the other. I mean, you can have all the attitude you want, and if you don't have policies and to back you up, to what good is it? So I've been thinking about this whole affair here about marching and what I have a quote from Martin Luther King, and it says, "Only when it's dark enough can we see the stars." And right now, I think that we are in a dark time. It's very dark out here with the pandemic going on and with equal rights, people speaking up. Mm-hmm. It's very dark. Mm-hmm. And what I see as the stars is the young people. Mm-hmm. I feel that they are the stars in the darkness here. I've been through lots of marches, and I'm from Delaware, so I've been through all the things that Jim has been through, as far as water fountains and sitting upstairs in the nigger heaven, as they called it. Wow. And so, and coming down to being the first people or last people out. So I've experienced all that. But I still say the young people are stars, and I want to leave it to them. I'm past my marching time. I've done a lot, and I'm still willing to help wherever I can. But I want the stars to shine in this darkness, and I think they are the young people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delores. And I agree with you in terms of stating that they are the stars. And so I will bring this question.
Rita, could I just add to what Delores had mentioned? We need to understand that when it comes to public policy, we were never included in any of those documents. And that's what Dr. King spoke of. The US Constitution, we were not included in that document. And unfortunately, kids learning US history now, they don't even read the Constitution. And our American history is so skewed that unfortunately, even our teachers have a lack of knowledge relative to true history, what is taught. So nothing is taught about the massacres that took place in Black communities where we were wiped out. When we talk about, public policy, rarely were we represented. And so when we look back in the 60s where Dr. King is saying, in the Constitution, part of my dream is I would like to see these things happen. We're still living Dr. King's dream. We have not, America, we have not woken up. We're still in a dream, in la la land. So when we talk about social justice, justice is ongoing. And it's just important for us to understand when we talk about the Constitution and all of those we the people, we were never part of we the people. And that's why we continue fighting for, it's called civil rights, social justice, so we could be a part of. But that's what we're still fighting to do. And that's still part of Dr. King's dream to be a part of. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you very much. I am going to go to Maryana and ask a question. Maryana?
Yes.
I don't see you. Oh, I don't see you. I was wondering if you could just, as a student, seeing some of these social injustices play out and having an understanding as to how long this has been going on, please tell me what that means to you. So you're hearing, Delores mention that youth are the stars, in this darkness. And then some of the stories in terms of the history that both Jim and Delores went through. So in hearing those, stories in this history, what are you thinking?
Well, at this point, it's all of our futures because we're all part of the minority every single generation. And when she says stars in this darkness, it's basically like, yes, it is our time to shine in a sort of tragic way, honestly, because none of us really want this discrimination and the racism pushed down our throats. But I believe that if a lot of the youth were more educated, because we honestly don't have a lot of education when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement. We probably get like one class out of the entire year when it's close to Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And then that's it. And then you also have on top of that the amount of whitewashing that's in our history, where it's basically like covering up the actual truth. So I think that if we were properly educated, a lot more of the youth would step forward and join us in our activism.
Okay, thank you. Brooke, now hearing that, and I'm just flipping this question actually towards you, in hearing that from Maryana, is that something that you do agree with in terms of just the social justice movement that's happening within your generation? Or do you feel that there are missing pieces to some of this background for you?
I believe that a lot of people youth are trying to get more educated on these subjects. However, what we learn in history class doesn't always reflect the truth. All are created equal, they're created with these certain unalienable rights and things like that. However, we read that in the books, we don't see that with our eyes. Something's wrong there. There is a disconnect between our education and what is actually playing out ahead of us. And I think that there should be some sort of bias training, social justice training in our history classes incorporated into the curriculum to facilitate this, because it's just not enough. What we see in class is not what we're getting outside. So a lot of youth are
Brooke, we don't hear you. Oh, goodness. Brooke, for some odd reason, you're silent or the connection is off.
No worries. Sorry, my computer. But not everything that we're seeing on textbooks is happening in front of our eyes. So I think that we need to be really mindful of what's in those books and what we're actually seeing, and seek out independent education, like coming to panels, coming to bias trainings, coming to social justice, like seeking out your own information, because without that, you could be misinformed on what's actually happening in America.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Thank you. You can go ahead and ask the next question.
All right. So do we really think that we can bridge the gap between his dream and our present reality? And how do you think we could do that?
This is for Delores.
Oh, well, you have so many, how should I say, things open to you. When I was growing up, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all the things that you're able to tie into and speak. And it's just amazing to me what you can learn if you're interested in learning it. And you can learn it fast and you can learn it slow by reading. There are many Black bookstores I read about that are opening up all over the country where you can go educate yourself. Get the books on history that you don't find in libraries or in your school library. But you're not waiting around sometimes to read all of that. You're just taking action, which I love. You're out marching, and maybe you don't know the back history of the story, but you know right now something's wrong, and I want to do something about it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I understand the impatience of youth, and I love that about youth sometimes. But so I say march on and make your voices heard, and read as you go along. Talk to people. If you want to know things, there's a way to find out. I mean, you can find out anything these days. It's amazing to me. You have the whole world open to you. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, Delores. Thank you. You know what? We could pose that same question to you, Jim, as well. Oh, you're muted.
How was that?
Can you hear me now? Vida.
No,
Yes, I can, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Another piece of sort of US history, when we talk about, you know, the Black community being more activist and looking at how did those Black communities materialize. So let me just share just a little bit of history that is not taught in our schools or our colleges when you take courses. You know, after the Civil War, we had a 12-year period of Reconstruction. And it was a point on President Lincoln, Blacks that wanted to leave the South, where should they go? And part of public policy under Lincoln is that he arranged for um, uh, the Union soldiers to place Blacks who desired to leave the South in northern cities, like a Chicago, a New York City, and Detroit, in all of these places. So when you say, how did all of these Black communities materialize? It goes all the way back to the Civil War and Reconstruction. And that's not taught in our American schools, you know, and it's so unfortunate when you don't know the origin, but you're dealing with what is sort of in your face. So when we talk about, you know, in Black communities, when we talk about lack of employment and lack of mobility and red zoning as far as housing, it goes all the way back to Reconstruction. They designed locales for Blacks to be, and they continue to stay there all the way up to 2021. So Blacks living in certain parts of US cities is part of slavery. And it's unfortunate that we don't know that history. So when we talk about bridging the gap, you bridge the gap by understanding your history. When we talk about way back in the 60s and Dr. King being a political leader, I just wish that young people would look at what took place in Georgia when we talk about the Senate runoffs. Stacey Abrams initially was running for governor and lost out because of voter suppression. She proved that in court. How she took her anger out was going to the Black communities throughout Georgia and orchestrating them about political activism, political leadership. And that's how those two Senate runoffs end up being sort of, I've used the word captured. We becoming activists like we should across America, we have the votes. But if we stay at home and always complain, never bridge the gap. So I don't care how old you are, we need to get out there and be public, be seen, and have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Vedna, we have a question from Eileen Elias to the speakers, to the
Okay.
panelists.
Well,
Can I read it?
Yeah, one moment, actually. We'll actually be done once we're done with our
Okay.
questions, then we'll go towards the questions, and we'll take them. Brooke and I will take them from the chat. Thank you.
I have a question for Maryana. When older generations say that this is the generation that will change everything, how does that resonate with you?
It's basically like, well, we're not gonna do nothing, you know? We're not gonna just like sit back and have people totally beat down our brothers and sisters, because that's just, oh, I was about to swear, sorry. That's just completely wrong. We're not gonna just look at everything happening around us and do absolutely nothing. We're going to take a stand and we're going to fight, because we don't want our lives to be like this anymore. We hear the amount of stories from older generations about racism and the amount of work that they put in for this rights movement, and then talking about how it is today. And we don't want for that to be us when we're older. Like, we don't want to go and tell our children those stories, and then our children telling their children about their run-ins with racism. We want racism and the amount of heavy discrimination on our minorities to just disband in our country, because we don't want our children to grow up with that around them.
Thank you, Maryana. Well said. I mean, there needs to be a point where this ends, and I agree with you. This shouldn't continue to where you're telling your children and your children are telling their children the same stories we are. So that's an excellent point. Excellent point. I will ask, I guess, the next question, Delores, and you just have to unmute. How is Dr. King's message in the civil rights movement or the beginning similar to the current social justice movement today? And I know that you know it's been talked about, but how do you feel there's similarities in it?
I wanted to speak to the young lady that just spoke about what we could do. She asked the question about what we could do. Well, you could vote. Make sure you vote if you're of age. Make sure you vote. Bring everybody. Bring the people that you march with in the streets. Bring them to the voting polls as well. Also, run for office. If we can get a president like we have now with hardly any education, I'm sure you young people can do the same thing. I mean, you're educated, you can move on. So that's how I feel about it. Put your foot out there and do the best that you can. And I'm sure people will follow you if you're, in agreement, if they're in agreement. And I really completely forgot what you asked me before, Vita.
Oh, goodness. I just said, I mean, and you kind of, I said that how does Dr. King's message in the civil rights movement, how is it similar to some of the social justice movement that's happening today?
It's very similar. Although we have more white people coming forward to speaking up and speaking out and joining our march. That's what's so wondrous to me today when I see just as many white people. And sometimes there's no black in all white communities. There's hardly any black people but the white people are taking the mantle up and marching on. And it's about time. And I think the George Floyd incident was a great, how you said, pull people together. They saw the ugliness of that, and any human being with any heart and wanted to protest, there was a stage for them to do so, and they did. So it isn't just Martin Luther King preaching, but it is people getting out and doing, taking up the mantle and moving into the streets, and lots of white people. That's what I am happy about. So that's what I think Martin Luther King wanted when he spoke of all races being together and working together. And this is what's happening now. It could be a lot more, but it's a start here, and it's a big start, and I'm pleased with that.
And I agree with you, Delores. I can honestly say, even during the events of this summer, the one thing that gave me hope when I did go to some of these rallies was the mixture of people that existed within the crowds, whether it was based on gender, whether it was based on age, whether it was based on race. It was such a mix, and it actually said to me that in those moments, regardless of what was happening within the year, the pandemic, social injustice, a death, that gave me hope. that gave me hope. So I agree with you. I agree
Yes.
with you.
Thank you.
Rita, could I
Well-
just jump in on that also? When we look at back to the early 60s and Dr. King, there were many whites involved relative to the freedom rides. And in so many cases where Molotov cocktail were thrown into the bus and or being burnt as we're trying to escape. So what I'm saying is change cannot just happen with just Black people. It takes a multiracial movement for this to happen. And this is what Dr. King was always pushing. It's us, it's we, not I. And so, I'm thrilled to see when now the marching, it continues to be multiracial. But when we talk about change, it's got to go beyond marching. As Delores has indicated, we've got to show up in the polls, and we've got to be activists beyond marching in the streets. And so it's important for us to keep the movement alive. Thank you, Delores.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Brooke has a question for you.
How do the events of January 6th tie into the social justice and injustice history of the nation?
Who is that for?
You.
Oh, okay. As I watched in horror, there's a realization that it was white supremacists, AKA KKK, marching under the mandates of the President of the United States. The piece that I'm amazed at is that I've got close friends who are Trump supporters, voted for Trump. And we've had discussions, and they share with me, Jim, he did nothing wrong. And so I look at perceptions for these individuals who are my friends and my neighbors, and they've got Trump signs up. And in front of my driveway, I got Black Lives Matter. We come with different perceptions. It's our truth, it's our reality. How do we come together? So when I see those images on TV, I look at the same images during the summer, the rioting, where again, the police were out in force. How did these groups of people walk into the Capitol? And I'll use that term walk in, even though there were minimal police barriers there. But look how they walked out. They walked out without one single arrest. When you talk about when people of color march, we're brutalized, we're arrested, we're taken to jail. And I still see this incredible dichotomy of perception, and we've got to get beyond that. And so when we talk about bridging the gap, I look at my neighbors and say, you believe in Trump and that he did nothing wrong. I say the opposite. We're our neighbors. How can we be brothers and sisters? How can we come together? And one of the things that, I'm trying to do and I'm learning is I have to respect their perception. But when it comes to social justice and treating people right and knowing right from wrong, I'm hoping that we can come together on that. And just one last statement I want to make. Back in my day, I call it back in the day, Jim Crow. And Jim Crow was isolation of Black and whites, threaten of physical harm, murder, and having no political voice. And I look at 2021, my skin covers my body, but not my character. And as Dr. King, in his speech, I Have a Dream, he talks about character. And we've got to deal with our own personal hate, our own personal racism, and our own personal prejudice, and not be in denial to say, that's not me. You could be involved in the movement, but you still got racism, you still got prejudice, and you need to come to terms with your own personal issues when we talk about bridging the gap.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are wrapping up our questions, but there are some questions in the chat that we saw. I'm just going to reframe just because we are a nonpartisan organization, but the question was asking, you know, what are your expectations for this next administration? And are you concerned with having Washington, D.C. being a fortress at this time? Anyone can answer.
Having, again, I'll jump in, having worked in the White House under President Clinton and President-elect, Biden, our paths have crossed. And our paths crossed when I was testifying in Congress relative to the Violence Against Women Act. We call it VAWA. And President-elect Biden was one of the chairs along with Senator Kennedy, and his heart is in the right place. I feel that his 47 years of experience in government, along with his partner, Senator Harris, he's going to have to make some really critical moves. And I use the word critical because critical can also be considered crises. He's entering the job with crises all around him. Mm-hmm. And it is my hope that he, as well as us, Trump had 74, million people supporting him, Biden had 80. And these two groups have got to come together for the love of America. We cannot continue to be separated. We've got to come together. And if we come together, he'll have a good presidential period for his first 4 years. Thank you.
May I say?
Yes, yes. And then we'll entertain one more question and then kind of wrap up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I see, but first of all, Biden and I are fellow Delawareans. Mm-hmm. I was born and raised in Delaware. And I would say good people come from Delaware. So, but as far as I see Biden, I like his humanitarianism that we've been missing for 4 years. With this president, I love the fact that he goes to church. Not that I'm a big church person, but I feel like he knows what we need no matter what goes on. Rules, regulations, all kinds of things being brought up. And what we really need is to know that we are all one, that we all bleed the same, we all bear children the same, that we are the same. And people haven't realized that yet, that even though our skins are different colors, we are one human race. And what you do to one, you do to others. You can't get away from that. And until we learn as a country and as a world that we are one human race, that we need to take care of each other, we need each other. And this may sound Pollyannish, but it's the real world. We are here on this planet together. There's no escaping. So we better learn how to treat each other like we would like to be treated. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Delores. And I will, there's one more question. It was a question that says, Ms. Hines, this particular person has been in situations where they're interacting with someone and someone says something that startles them so much that they're almost without words. How do you, how do you, like based on experiences, do you have any recommendations on how to interact with people that may show opposition to like a certain effort? That's open to anyone. I don't know if Maryana wants to answer or Jim. So
I would just like to just say that in reference to that, I read a statement once, whatever you want from someone, give it to them first. If you want love, give it to them first. They want your attention, give it to them first. So that's my take on whatever the question was. I gave the wrong answer to the wrong question.
No, that's correct. That's your answer. That's your answer.
Yeah,
I want to follow Delores.
Uh-huh.
I always want to follow Delores.
Maryana, do you have anything
I
to
had
say?
said earlier,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I've been in
mhm.
I've been in multiple situations where I was really starstruck at what somebody had said to me.
Mhm.
For instance, I have on like my Portuguese side of the family, I have a couple Trump supporters on that side, and we never bring up politics around them because, you know, we don't want to start an argument.
Just safe, yes.
But then, like, one of my family members said something about the raid on the Capitol, and I was just, it was kind of the mindset, like, how could you say something like that? And I had to like recollect myself and really think for a second, how do I want to approach this? Because my initial reaction was to like, and I think for a lot of people's initial reaction whenever they're faced with somebody saying something totally racist is to just like yell at them because you're so angry and upset with that person, or at least that's how it is for me. But I had to basically provide factual information to them on how what they just said was incorrect. And I think that's a good thing to do if you're ever brought to complete silence when somebody says something to you, just to recollect yourself, go and try to give information back to that person, kind of like a debate instead of having a full-blown argument.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maryana. We're going to end this panel just because we're coming up on time, but I just want to thank our panelists. I guess give them kind of like a round of applause. Thank you for their participation and their candor, and providing us some historical context as well as a look into the future in a sense. So thank you. We're going to go to Christina Brown, who is part of the Bethel AME Church as well as Indivisible Plymouth, and she's just going to kind of like bring this all together in a sense and be reflective of this time. Christina.
Hello. So I am first going to say that I tried to get as many quotes during the actual session as I could and build a slide deck around the session. So this is the first time I tried to do this in real time. So I need no typos. And I tried to move as fast as I could, but really thinking about the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And this quote has always inspired me, and it's been one of the things that has been a driving force behind the work of Indivisible Plymouth. So I just want to remind people that Dr. King was a radical anti-war leftist. He just happened to change the nation and just happened to have history changed so that we can remember it as the guy who sat with Rosa Parks and fixed things in a weekend, had a dream and made everything better. And it was just all miraculous and happened quickly and wasn't painful and wasn't full of arrests and violence and newspaper headings that talked about what a horrible person he was and how he was destroying our country. And just a reminder that 75% of Americans disapproved of him during his lifetime and when he died. And many people were actually happy when he was assassinated. And that our lives end when we become silent about things that matter, as Reverend Simmons said earlier. And as a community, we are working to not become silent when we see things that matter. And that this is really about the future of our democracy. As James said, Mississippi is the armpit of the civil rights movement. But one of the things that's important to remember is not just our martyrs, but that when people come together and come forward to help of different racial backgrounds, what is powerful. And so this is a picture of the mothers of Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman in 1975, and just thinking about their pain of their loss of their 20, 21, and 24-year-old sons, and what was probably said to them when it happened about how this was their son's fault for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and how many other mothers and families have heard about their children being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And part of why these images is important is that we see often the families of slain people at their most painful moments. And I want us to think about what it would be like to be in their space and to be in their shoes and their long journey, and to have us focus on pictures of them when they are prepared to be in the media and when they get to say, this is how I want to look and how I want to be seen. And also to remember the ways we represent people in art and the power of art to shape how we see things, and that it is much better to remember this picture of George Floyd than the picture of someone on his neck, which is what we always see on the TV, and how the images we choose to curate about what people in pain look like also curate who is deserving of pain and who is not. This is Breonna Taylor, as I choose to remember her and her family, and just thinking about what that looks like, and the many martyrs for centuries that have come before them, and the ways they are captured in the media. And that we do hope the cycle of discrimination and hatred will soon come to an end. And these are pictures from the peaceful vigil that was held in Plymouth, and the power of those people coming together, and also thinking about the power of all those people having cell phones, as James talked about, and the ways that we're telling different stories and capturing them in different ways. And the way Delores talked about the importance of white people taking up the mantle and marching, and that change can't happen just with Black people. It has to happen in multiracial, intersectional movements. And that more than 40% of the counties in the US, including Plymouth, held a protest, and nearly 95% of those counties are majority white, just as Plymouth County is. And what that means for a change in our country when people are standing up together. And this is not just a problem for Black people. This is a problem for people who care about our democracy. And we must look to Georgia and what took place there, as James reminded us. But I also want to remind us, as we look to think about this movement, a difference in this movement is that we have memes in this movement, which the past movement did not have, and those can be a force for good or a force for evil. And that there were people in Georgia who were lynched. There was a Jewish man that was lynched, and there were many African Americans that were lynched. And to think of a Jewish man and a Black man now being senators representing the state in which their ancestors were lynched, and in which John Lewis and Martin Luther King were arrested multiple times, and how we honor their legacy by voting and engaging in peaceful protest that moves the work forward. And I want to push us to think about, how do we allow hate to go around? What have we learned from US history? Very little. What we learn in history classes doesn't always reflect the truth. And I have heard people say, as we all have over the past 2 weeks, this is not who we are. And that is not something that any reflective look at history can actually sustain. And in the opening quote that Yaxsarie read, history is the story of evil forces that advance with seemingly irresistible power, only to be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice. But that is only if the forces of justice come together. And if the forces of justice choose not to come together, then the battering rams don't actually work. Young people are the stars in the darkness, and we have to have hard conversations with young people, and we have to really reflect on the power of history. And if Black children are old enough to experience racism, then white children are old enough to learn about it. And we have to get further and have courageous conversations in our families with our children and talk about what is really happening in our country. We must learn to stop saying this is not who we are. We must instead study history with our children and proclaim this is not who we aspire to be, and do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina, for that powerful presentation and those words. This was a wonderful morning. I think she's said it all. I don't think I need to add. We will leave you with a video. And also just, I don't know if Jean can come back on as well. Just to kind of join us this afternoon at 11, Bethel AME Church in Plymouth is having a service. And as they always do during this time. So I would hope for you to join. The link is actually in the email or in the poster that was promoting this event. I want to also say that you can join our Plymouth No Place for Hate every second Thursday of the month and come and see what we're doing. We are a committee of 13, but we do have liaisons and visitors. We've been here since at least 20 years. We've existed here in the Plymouth area. We are a town committee, appointed members as well. I also would like to thank some of our elected officials that are here with us today, the ones that I can see, and I apologize for those that I can't see. We have our rep, Matt Moratori, who's here with us this morning, as well as our Senator, Susan Moran, who's joined us as well. And I'd also like to thank just our partners again, Barnstable No Place for Hate, Pilgrim Hall, Museum, Donna Curtin. Congressman Keating's office is here as well. So thank you for everyone who's joined us. Also, as I mentioned before, Bethel AME Church, and all the contributors, our panelists who were absolutely wonderful for coming. Yes, go ahead, Jean.
Thank you. I would second what Venda said and thank all of our panelists for your frankness, for sharing your personal experiences in the civil rights movement and in the Black Lives Movement. I thought you all did a great job and it's much appreciated. And on behalf of Barnstable No Place for Hate, I want to say, just read you what our mission is, because I think it's important and speaks to some of what was discussed today. Barnstable No Place for Hate's mission is that the program values diversity and support the civil rights of all people. We are positive, loving response to hatred, intolerance, and all other forms of bigotry and discrimination. We strive to work with like-minded individuals and groups in serving the people of the town of Barnstable and beyond at this point by providing or supporting community services that will keep Barnstable a safe and welcoming place. We are a voice to create public awareness, providing education, services, and resources, advocating for legislation that benefits the lives of all people, and creating public communication campaigns. You can visit us on our Facebook page for Barnstable No Place for Hate or barnstablenoplaceforhate.com. And you can find out more about the activities we're doing. But primarily, our focus is really on the things that you heard today, educating the public, standing up and speaking out, and advocating for change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean. Also, too, as Jean has mentioned in terms of finding her Barnstable No Place for Hate, also Plymouth No Place for Hate has a website, www.plymouthnoplaceforhate.org, as well as a Facebook site and an Instagram as well. And we just completed a PSA with our local cable company that will also be coming out soon. I'm going to leave you with the video. This last video is just a culmination of some of the events that happened not only this summer, but earlier this year, as well as some look back into our history. We do have it is in the background, you will hear one of the Plymouth Northern Lights alumna singing Glory from the movie Selma. So this is what we'll leave you with today.
It will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be here sure. Oh, glory. Oh. One day when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be here sure. Oh, glory. Now the war is not over, victory isn't won, and we'll fight on to the finish. And when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory. We'll cry glory, oh glory. One day when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be here sure, crying glory.
I guess just with the last, we have one last slide that kind of speaks to what Reverend King has mentioned in terms of what we have to do moving forward. And in that slide, it says, now is the time to make the real promise, to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending national elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. Now is the time to lift our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity. And to know that these words are still relevant today I do believe that now is the time, and I'm sure others, is for us to stand in brotherhood and really move towards the system of injustice to human dignity. Thank you again all for coming.